Welcome to the latest episode of The Federal's Worldly Wise, a weekly program that attempts to take a closer and deeper look at trending international issues. Iran is once again at the center of global attention amid internal unrest and rising international tensions. To unpack these complexities, we speak to the Federal's consulting editor, K.S. Dakshinamurthy, who closely tracks global power dynamics. Thank you for joining once again, sir. My first question is, US President Donald Trump has revived his tough stance on Iran, similar to his earlier maximum pressure policy. So why is the US and particularly Trump so much opposed to Iran?
The US-Iran breakdown happened many years ago in 1979 after the Iranian Revolution. Okay, that's a historical fact. But what has happened over a period of time, especially in recent years, is that Iran has taken a very strong position against Israel. So this happened sometime in 2005. So Iran took a very strong, when Mohammad Ahmadinejad was the president of Iran, he took a very strong position against Israel. And he, in fact, even questioned the existence of Israel and all that. So that kind of took the animosity that already existed post the revolution into some, into a much higher level. So basically, that has been the kind of the subterranean or the subtext of the relationship between Iran, the US, and of course Israel. See, it's a very complex question, because we also need to look at the US-Israel relationship. And US and Israel, as you know, are extremely close. They're, in fact, in many ways organically linked to each other in their strategy, etc., etc. So if Israel has a problem, it's the US which will go and sort it out. So when Iran is so much upset with or so much opposed to Israel, obviously Israel looks to the US for support, and which is what the US has been doing it for a very long time. But things kind of snowballed after the US invaded Iraq in 2003. And then you had, like I told you, Ahmadinejad, actually questioning the existence of Israel. So after that, the US started applying pressure on on its nuclear program. So Iran was already in the initial stages of developing its nuclear program. And after the invasion of Iraq, what it basically did was it alerted the entire region to this reality that the US can reach up to the Middle East, or West Asia as we call it in India. So the US can reach up to the Middle East, and it could target any country. So this was a new kind of a reality. So Iran also kind of prepared itself and wanted to go in for of course, Iran officially has always maintained that it's using its nuclear power for peaceful purposes. But what the US and Israel did was they used this opportunity to put pressure on Iran. So from 2005 onwards, from the time of George W. Bush, there has been a lot of pressure on Iran to stop its nuclear program. So which Iran, of course, hasn't, because as we all know, Israel is also nuclear power, though it has officially never acknowledged it. So for Iran, it's just a logical thing that if your rival has nuclear power, even you should, for your self-protection. So what happened is that, so this tension continued until the time of Obama. And the US imposed sanctions, and there was a lot of pressure, but Iran resisted it pretty well. So when Obama became the president of the US, so he was a little more conciliatory, and under him, you had this deal, the nuclear deal, under which Iran said that, yes, it would not go ahead with its enrichment of uranium. And it would open its facilities for inspection whenever the International Atomic Energy Agency wanted. So it was kind of, the deal was struck. The European nations were also along with, they signed the deal along with Obama. So it was all good. This upset Israel, very much, because Israel was just looking for an opportunity to take a shot at take a shot at Iran, because if you look at the region, Israel has not allowed any country to develop nuclear power. In fact, it went to Iraq and it demolished, it attacked its nuclear reactor. It did the same with other nations in the region as well, even with Egypt a little earlier. So Israel was looking at an opportunity to go and strike Iran. But when this nuclear deal was struck, they were, of course, pretty upset with it. When Trump came to power in the U.S., Trump, as you know, was a Republican, and he's a kind of a extremist. He's a extreme right-wing politician. So, and he's also unpredictable, and he has a particularly close relationship with Israel, because one of the reasons is that he has the massive support of the Jewish lobby in the US, and the Christian right also supports him in the US. Now, all these are sections in the US which are very pro-Israel. So Trump is automatically pro-Israel. So what he did much more than, say, the other presidents like George W. Bush or Obama did. He simply went and first thing he did was he abrogated the agreement, nuclear deal. And since then, and it was in his first term, so he was slowly gearing up to put pressure on Iran. And then, of course, Trump lost the elections in 2020. He came back, and now once he has come back, he's again at it. And Israel, so eventually the whole thing came to a boil. You had the issues in Gaza, the assault on Gaza, etc., where Iran was not quiet all this while. What Iran did for its own self-protection and to maintain some kind of a power balance, it built an axis with the other Shia forces in Hezbollah, then Hamas, and in Syria. And they formed a very strong axis which kind of was to counter Israel. Now, ever since the Gaza assault happened, Israel, along with the US, managed to neutralize this axis, Iran's axis. And Iran, in some way, got isolated. So in June last year, about, say, 6 months ago, when Israel launched a missile strike on Iran, on its nuclear facilities, of course, Iran retaliated. I mean, Iran is not a small power. Iran retaliated. In fact, Iran also rained missiles onto Israel, which was quite unexpected. So basically, then Trump took over. Trump took over when he realized that Israel on its own could not, control Iran or, attack Iran successfully. So the US, with its superior missile power, it launched its, bunker buster bomb, and it on a very key Iranian nuclear facility at Fordo, and actually crippled the program. Now, the US and Israel want to continue to take the advantage of that, to take advantage of Iran's weakness and want to finish the job. According to him, what is it to finishing the job would mean changing the regime. They want somehow to dislodge the Ayatollah Khamenei dispensation, the Islamic dispensation, and replace it with a more liberal, more US-friendly and more Israel-friendly regime. So this is why you find suddenly this heavy pressure by Trump on Iran.
Okay. Iran is actually witnessing a widespread, protests and a severe state crackdown with reports of internet shutdowns and mass arrests. So how serious is the current internal crisis in Iran, and does it pose a structural challenge to the regime, or is the state still firmly in control?
See, as far as Iran is concerned, Iran's regime, the Ayatollah Khomeini, the Islamic regime, it's not a very simple structure. It's a pretty comprehensive structure which is networked very nicely, from top to bottom. It's not like you remove, say, Ayatollah Khamenei or the Iranian president, then the whole country will collapse or the government will collapse. It doesn't work like that, because you have a lot of other people who can take their place. So Trump, in the way he looks at the world, in the way that the world is now experiencing, which nobody can figure out. So according to him, he feels that he and Israel and his administration, they all feel that we can replace the Khamenei regime. So why I'm saying this is, there is a direct interference by the US and Mossad has, very openly said that they are now working with the protesters in Iran. Now these protests actually, in some ways, is more serious than the previous protests because one of the biggest support base of the Iranian regime has been the bazaar or the small traders, the small and medium traders. They are a huge support base for the Ayatollah Khamenei regime and the Islamic Republic. Now, what has happened is because of the huge inflation and a massive economic crisis which the country is going through, it has affected even this support base, and they are protesting. Now, their protest is a genuine protest. They are upset because they're not able to carry out their day-to-day activity, and it's very tough. I mean, to go on, doing business this way, and the sanctions are also having a massive effect on Iran, and the US is trying as much as possible to squeeze the Iranian economy. So it is having its impact in that. So that way, the traders, the bazaar is having a huge problem. So they are protesting. They are protesting and they want the government to do something. So it's a very vulnerable time for the Iranian government. Now, how this will pan out is something we should see. But then what has happened is that the entry of, say, the US or Israel into this particular internal protest is complicating things, and it may in fact be counterproductive. Though Trump and Israel feel that they're helping the protesters, the moment Israel or the US openly comes out and supports the protesters, what it tends to do in Iran is to delegitimize the protest, because though 50 years have gone by since the Iranian revolution, there is still a lot of anti-US, anti-Israel feeling in Iran. So people, when they see that Israel and Iran are trying to utilize the situation to their advantage, they quickly back off. And this is what has happened in earlier protests. There have been many other protests as well. And whenever the Trump or not Trump, whenever the US or Israel get into the picture, the whole thing gets diluted. So what they're willy-nilly doing is, by openly interfering, they are, really mismanaging their own, or their over enthusiasm is basically going to be counterproductive for Israel and for the US. And this protest will go on, like any government will respond to a protest, Iran is responding. So, and there can be ups and downs in the way they do it. So, I mean, that's how it is. So it is what I would say is that, yes, it is serious, but it is not so serious as to see a collapse of, the revolution or the Islamic regime. Yeah.
So, but no other nation in West Asia appears to be supporting Iran. Why is that?
See, what has happened in the Middle East or, West Asia, Iran, number one, even after the revolution, it's a Shia-dominated country. It's dominated by the Shia. And Saudi Arabia is the largest, its neighbor is the largest Sunni country in the region. So the moment the Islamic revolution happened in Iran, there was a lot of suspicion amongst the other Sunni ruled nations, and especially a monarchy like Saudi Arabia felt that something similar could happen in Saudi Arabia as well. Because what did the Iranian revolution do? It overthrew the monarchy, right, of the Shah Reza Pahlavi. So when the Shah was overthrown, the monarchy was overthrown. So Saudi Arabia immediately from then on always felt very threatened. And then, and it's the whole region. There are Shia nations like Bahrain is got a lot of Shia population. You have Syria, and you have Lebanon. There's a large Shia population. So it kind of created a Shia-Sunni divide in the region. And since then, there has been a kind of a disconnect that has been created since the Iranian revolution, though it is not. And then you also have Iran, which is a Persian country, which is not Arabic. The others are all Arabs. So there is that difference as well. So these fault lines have become more serious. So what has happened is, over a period of time, Iran has kind of got there's a disconnect. I wouldn't call it isolated, but there's a kind of disconnect to a point where Saudi Arabia started feeling more comfortable with Israel, which is the arch rival of the entire region. So Saudi Arabia feel more comfortable with Israel than with Iran, especially with the developing nuclear program of Iran. Everybody else felt insecure. Though there is a lot of irony in all this because Israel is a nuclear power and it can use it against any of these countries. But the situation is so interesting that you have an internal kind of a feud or a rivalry within the Muslim nation. They're all Muslim nations basically, but within that there is no unity. So what you basically see, the sum and substance of it is that what you basically see is a total lack of unity amongst the Muslim nations in the Middle East, and that is the reason why you find Iran completely isolated. You have, for instance, Qatar, which is probably quite close to Iran in many ways. Iran helped Qatar, during the time of the blockade in 2016, when Saudi Arabia, UAE blockaded Qatar. So even then, you have a US base in Qatar, and then in June, Iran of all the countries, it tried to bomb the US base by firing a missile into Qatar, and Qatar was really taken aback because they didn't expect it from Iran. So it's a little complicated. So in the sum and the end of it, you have Iran on its own. There is really nobody else today in that region who can stand up and say we back Iran. There is no one. So to that extent as well, it looks on paper at least that Iran is vulnerable.
Okay. India has historically maintained a careful balance with Iran, driven by energy security, Chabahar port interests, and regional stability. But at the same time, India's partnerships with the US and Israel have also deepened. So, how difficult is India's balancing act with Iran today?
If I have to say it in one sentence, India has given up as far as its relationship with Iran is concerned. Because India and Iran, if you go back, say, about 15, 20 years, it was pretty close. It was pretty close. In fact, there was even a proposal to have a oil pipeline from India to Iran running through Pakistan, where Pakistan was supposed to kind of pay a kind of they were supposed to pay Pakistan for the rent for the, it was that kind of a agreement where the pipeline would run through Pakistan, and then you had, it was a great both for Iran and for India and even for Pakistan. So it was that kind of a situation when the Manmohan Singh government was in power. In fact, but then when the US, imposed sanctions, it put pressure on India not to go ahead with that project. And so eventually that project just, just went into, it just came apart. Nothing happened to it, though there were initial movements and some developments that happened. So what it basically goes to show is that India is not able to resist this pressure from the US. So even now, India has actually considerably reduced its oil imports from Iran. Because of the pressure from the US and especially Trump, it's not been able to withstand that kind of pressure. So you have now a situation where with the punitive tariffs being threatened, 25% tariffs, which which Trump has now threatened, India really doesn't have that kind of an ability to stand up to it and say, no, we will continue with the relationship. So India has not been able to. So even the Chabahar port, which is very crucial for India's strategic interest, it's really a lot of impediments are now coming in the way, and it's not really clear where all these projects will stand. And if this thing continues, if Trump continues to put pressure on Iran, definitely there'll be a very minimal, if not almost nothing kind of a relation, trade between the two countries. But politically, of course, Iran and India, have rarely, they have not really rarely disagreed. If at all, occasionally, Kashmir has been an issue where Khomeini in the past has said certain things critical of India as far as Kashmir is concerned. But otherwise, broadly, India and Iran have historically shared a very close relationship. You have a lot of Indians, a few million Indians, in fact, studying and working in Iran. So it's that kind of a relationship. So that, this will not affect that in any manner. That will continue. If at all, there may be some evacuation that might happen if the tensions rise and if there's actually some kind of a military exchange that happens. So otherwise, the relationship exists, but they are not. Both India, of course, and Iran are not able to go ahead and improve the relationship or develop it or increase it, though they would like to very much because of US pressure. So in that sense, like I told you to begin with, there's really India. It's India is at the mercy of the US as far as its relationship with Iran is concerned. Unlike, say, let me point out China. China is probably the only country that is standing by Iran as far as its trade is concerned, and they're somehow managing to cope up with the sanctions because of China. India is, of course, it's not been able to do much as far as its ties with Iran is concerned.
Thank you for your insights, sir. Viewers, for more such programs, stay tuned with The Federal.